Hello, everyone, and welcome to the September edition of the French Cinémathèque, a collaboration between the Federation of Alliance Française USA and Telescope Film. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Justine Barda, and I'm the founder and director of telescopefilm.com, which is a website for international film and TV. We offer a database of over 500,000 international films and series with links to where to watch them in the US. We also have a dedicated page on the site for French film and TV with information about what's new and what's popular from France, as well as curated selections. We are delighted to be collaborating with AFUSA, the largest Alliance Française network in the world, helping 25,000 learners of French each year learn French, live French, and love French. Here's a short video. I'll put links to more information about both AFUSA and Telescope Film in the chat in just a moment. The French Cinémathèque takes place the fourth Monday of every month. So next month, we'll be meeting on Monday, October 27th. We'll be doing an archival film. It's the first time we've done one. And since we'll be meeting just a few days before Halloween, we chose the psychological horror thriller Les Diaboliques, directed by Henri-Georges Clouzot and starring Simone Signoret, Vera Clouzot, Paul Maurice, and Charles Vanel. But our film for today, another story of murder and murderers, is When Fall is Coming, directed by François Ozon. Before we get started, just a few brief housekeeping notes. First of all, please keep yourselves muted when you're not speaking and stay on speaker view. To ask a question, please raise your hand using the Zoom feature at the bottom of your screen. It's in the reaction section, or you can always put your question in the chat. If there are technical issues, you may want to leave the Zoom, then sign back in after a couple of minutes using the original Zoom link. This event is being recorded for our YouTube channels, and the total runtime is 1 hour. And with that, I'd like to introduce our facilitator, who is also the Chief Film Critic for Variety, Peter Debruge. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Justine. So let's see, I'm just trying to get a sense of, it looked like we might have had a pretty good turnout today, but I need to gauge, how do I see everybody? We've got like 3 pages worth of people. So for those of you who are new to this format or haven't been with us in a while, welcome to our familiar faces. Welcome back. Sometimes the movies that we watch kind of have an obvious theme that I can kind of maybe dominate the conversation a little bit with, but I think that this movie is pretty special in that it's very accessible. It has lots of different talking points. And so what I'm going to do is just give a little bit of setup, but I kind of want to make this as much a conversation more than, kind of a lecture or something as possible. And so I want to hear people's responses and things like that. But just to sort of contextualize, sometimes people come to these sessions not having yet watched the movie or not knowing a whole lot about the filmmaker. I think François Ozon, who's a favorite French filmmaker of mine, has been a frequent, we've looked at a lot of his films over the course of this series, even before I was kind of moderating them. The Summer of '85, of course, is one that we did just a few months back. And, he's a very versatile filmmaker. Certain themes come up throughout his work. I think he's got a pretty open-minded view of human sexuality that, certainly factors into this film, and and he's very prolific. He makes, on a pretty regular basis, at least a film a year. He just had another film. This film that we're talking about today, When Fall is Coming, premiered at the San Sebastian Film Festival. That's going on this week except it was a year ago that this premiered there. And just a month ago, he premiered an adaptation of Albert Camus' The Stranger at the Venice Film Festival. So he's cranking them out, but not in a, he's got it down. It's like I think one thing that I really appreciate about today's film is the almost casualness with which he presents it. It's almost, it reminds me a lot of a filmmaker like Claude Chabrol from back in the day, who would do these kind of thrillers or these psychological mystery type movies, and yet of course he's getting into all sorts of interesting water. So what I would like to kind of gauge is maybe we can start by hearing from a couple people who had a strong reaction to the movie, kind of hear what it was that tickled you or intrigued you or ticked you off, and we can kind of factor in a few of those points and then kind of organically follow the conversation. But I see a few people are jumping right in. What we suggest is to raise your hand, which you can do here on Zoom, and then it kind of shows up at the top of my screen in order that people did that. So Alan and Jerry, you kind of hit the buzzer first. Let's hear from you.
Yeah, it was a charming film. What beyond that, what really struck me was how as the story unfolded, it raised a lot of moral questions and kind of threw them out there. Like right to begin with, the main character Michelle had been a sex worker. She's now in retirement. So the question is that something to be ashamed of, or something to be,
something for her daughter to be ashamed of?
Right. And, she, I think a lot of women probably, if they get into that, it's out of necessity. For her, it was it seems to have been a conscious choice, and she did well by herself financially. She's got a comfortable retirement. She's got assets, and she's used those assets to help her. She's been generous with them. She's helped her daughter, her grandson. So, there's the question about that. How do you feel about that? That as a career choice. You also
Definitely.
have the question
we'll definitely get into that. Go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, there's the question of, what do you owe your children? She's been fairly generous with her daughter, but her daughter is still kind of asking for more. And conversely, what do you owe your parents? I mean, the daughter has been reluctant to allow the grandson to spend as much time with the grandmother as she would really like. So there's that question. There's a question about, redemption and rehabilitation for people who have, have done criminal acts and been in prison. She's Michelle has invested in him to open a bar business, which is risking her assets to do that. So there's that question about how much how much rope do you give to to someone like that, and just one more. Lucas, the grandson, was he justified in lying to the police inspector about when he crossed paths with Vincent coming into the building? So yeah, I could go on and on about different questions, but what I liked about the movie is that it puts those questions out there without really nudging us in one direction or the other. He puts them out there for us to think about and come to our own conclusions about them. So.
Yeah, that's a great kind of like set of things to sort of like talk about, and we'll hear from a couple other people, but I think I'm guessing that a lot of the people here on the call would agree that like you've kind of like focused on some of the more interesting things. There's of course the the kind of off-screen homosexuality of the kind of surrogate son, the helper character, some other things too that are kind of interesting. And I think as you talk about the grandson's kind of choice at the end, I'm not sure the person who just texted, if you haven't seen the film, it's okay. We will talk about it, including the ending here. But you know, like with if you're in a book club or something, you probably sometimes don't get to the end of the book by the time the discussion happens or whatever. And hopefully it'll inform or inspire you to check it out if you haven't or haven't finished it. But the reason that people make choices is just as interesting as the kind of like, are they justified or not? So we'll get into some of those things. Anne Marie, let's hear from you, please. I don't recognize your face. Are you a new participant? You're muted though.
My face being recorded, so I usually can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so for this film, I did a careful watch, and it really seemed to me that although it seemed like a thriller that involved some moral issues, it was really more of a political or generational parable than a literal thriller. Okay, it was like it starts off where we're in what seems like La France profonde, and elderly women going to church and gathering mushrooms, which of course the French are such gourmets and gourmands that they love their picking mushrooms. And then she's cooking the meal, and it's like, well, gee, is she possibly trying to poison somebody? And the plot angle of sex workers, there are people who know a lot about more about this than I do, but it seemed to me that after prostitution was legalized, this kind of high-class call girl wasn't such a thing in France. I could be way wrong, but this plot line just seemed a little bit less than realistic, and especially this whole cadre of friends who showed up at Michelle's funeral. It's like it just didn't quite ring realistic. It had a sort of impact, but not a realistic one. And the Vincent, who's found his MILF or GILF, whatever the case may be, it's like, okay, you're effing grandma now, and what did the older generation do wrong, and all these kinds of elements that are so real, really, in French society. So
I didn't read Vincent as being heterosexual. In fact, I think they make it pretty clear that he's like, hooking up in the cemetery and things like that, kind of behind his. So there's something else going on there that I don't think is ilfing, like
right. Although even if it's only in pretend or whatever, he takes her arm, when they
Sure. I mean, there's definitely it's a relationship that we're meant to think of as quite unusual, especially given that the sister is so not the sister, sorry, the daughter is so antagonistic towards the mother, and here comes this kind of surrogate proxy child in which she can kind of almost lavish on him, and he's receptive to a kind of affection that her own flesh and blood wouldn't take. Jackie, go ahead. So here I'm just kind of collecting a few responses, and then we'll kind of dig into some things. Go ahead.
I really liked the ambiguity of the film. It started off very slow, and it built and built and built, and there were so many questions, and I don't know the answers. I'd love to hear what people think, whether the mother was trying to poison the daughter, whether Lucas might have poisoned his mother because of that whole thing where he hates mushrooms, but then in the end he says, I always loved them. So did he do it? Obviously the whole issue of, did she send Vincent to kill the daughter, or did she just send Vincent to talk to her? Was it an accident or wasn't it? So it gave me so much to think about, and I've been thinking about it since I saw it. I liked it a lot.
My knee-jerk reaction to some of those things, but I don't want to deprive us of the conversation, is that I think that there's a real obliviousness to Michelle. I think the poisoning is probably accidental. But it is interesting how even when that happens, the daughter picks up, and Freud might agree with her, like, whether you meant to or not, it happened, and this is part of a toxic pattern with her. And we should probably believe the daughter that there's been some pretty difficult times in the past, even if now we're seeing something that makes us very sympathetic to Michelle. But I'm not going to impose too much of a reading right now. Let's hear from a couple more, and then even though we're going to get to everyone, we might start to kind of throw some topics to focus on out. But so Suzette, tell us what your feeling was.
Well, I love the movie. I love all of his movies. And what I really, really appreciate is, like the woman just mentioned, that he lays out the story very slowly. There's not superheroes and crashes and all this. It's very appealing to me. Did he do the swimming pool as well?
Yes, and it's worth recognizing that was the film in which he first cast Ludovine Seigneur. Was it that, or was it Water Drops on Burning Rocks? But he essentially discovered the actress who's now grown up to play a mother.
Yeah.
And he was basically a Lolita kind of nymphette character. So yes, it is La Piscine director.
I
But
just
that's what I enjoyed. I mean, I just enjoyed watching the movie. I mean, just as a production.
Susan, we'll come back to you. Justine was just going to clarify something. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to jump in really quick to say I put a link to all of the films of Francois Ozon that are currently streaming in the US in the chat. So you can.
Great. So if you want to catch up, or if you've missed some, but carry on, Suzette. Go ahead.
Well, that was really all I had to say. I mean, I enjoyed the storyline and how the information about the characters was sort of slowly revealed, and then the ambiguities that result from that, and our perceptions of what we're seeing are sort of questioned constantly by it. It's like a meaty film with lots going on underneath and over top and all around, and it's just the kind of film I love.
And I love the way that when it is those things, it's doing so quite like subtly or discreetly. It's like it's not, it doesn't feel dense. And yet, Justine, I'm trying to remember, like, we caught up in Palm Springs. That's where I saw this movie. Is this at the Palm Springs Film Festival in January? Is that where you saw it too?
Yep.
That was kind of where it first reached the US. And so I've, had it in the back of my head for 7 months, and I rewatched it, this weekend for our conversation. And you'll find that some of that richness, that very subtle richness, is woven in early on in ways that you almost wouldn't think of until you're rewatching. So you may get something out of going back to watch this movie a second time in the future. A good example is, think about what the opening scene is. First off, we don't know until nearly an hour into the film what Michelle's secret is. It's a secret, an open secret. It's like, and it's obviously a major source of embarrassment for the daughter, because all of the classmates seem to have teased her for having a mother who was a prostitute. And but the opening scene is a church sermon about Mary Magdalene and the kind of the virtuousness of and the more than anything, I think it's about the Christian capacity to forgive someone who was or is a prostitute. And it's like, so the movie's kind of taking a stand before we've even realized or even have reason to connect what it's kind of like, in a movie, whenever the television is on, either it's playing cartoons because that's what they can license for free, or it's playing exactly something that's commenting on the themes of the movie. Have you ever noticed, like, the television is somehow always, relevant? Like that sermon is, and it's right there in the opening scene, so she's presented as this kind of, what would be the word, like this very gentle old woman who goes to church, who collects mushrooms, but she's got a pretty radical past, considering like what the other people in town might think. And so in watching it again, you start to pick up on she is the one who says, when talking about the young man who's going to come out of prison, to her friend, like, everyone deserves a second chance. She's talking about herself as much as she's talking about the young man, but we have no reason to realize that she is someone who ever needed a second chance this early in the story. So anyway, just throwing a couple of those details out that on first viewing might have blown right by you the same way they did for me until I had a chance to come back around. Deidre, would you like to share your opinion? I saw you nodding in response to one of the earlier questions, so you're also welcome to answer or pose theories. We can start to kind of dig in at this point.
No, thanks. I've missed you guys. I'm sorry for being late. I just finished the film about 2 minutes after 6. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I agree with a lot of things that have been said. But I think what I enjoyed, and someone said this earlier, is that it's a film that has a slow burn and it builds on the sort of the foundation, like you said, starting with the church scene and then sort of ending in a scene of death, which I kind of wasn't expecting, but obviously you kind of see it getting there. But I think the most powerful part of the entire film for me was the relationship between all of the different parties, because there's so much strife between the mother and the daughter, but yet you see the juxtaposition of all the love between the grandson and the son. And so there's this familiar love between families that aren't necessarily traditional, because the grandmother is taking care of the son, and then she has Vincent, who becomes sort of her surrogate son because she really wants to take care of him. But also what I truly appreciated was the ambiguity. Several of you have mentioned that, because it wasn't until the end of the film that I really started to see where some of the plot lines I thought I understood or had clarity around were far more ambiguous. And I enjoyed that about the film. So I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I love hearing what everyone is saying.
So I think the point I saw you nodding at, and it's a point that I don't think I even considered, was, could Lucas have been responsible for poisoning his mother? Did you think that was a possibility?
I didn't think about it until the end for 2 reasons. One, because he was so aggressive about eating those mushrooms at the end. I thought that was interesting. And he said it as if to say, of course I love mushrooms. That was just a momentary, that was a situation that was in the moment. But I got the impression that there was a reason why they wanted to see that, but also the wink between he and Vincent when they're riding to the forest. And they're winking about, is it the mushrooms, or are they winking about, Luca clearly knows that Vincent had something to do with his mother's death. So to me, that, I thought that's what I was nodding about, was that possibly Luca could have had something to do with his mother becoming sick over the mushrooms. And it was obvious to me throughout the film that Luca really didn't want to be with his mother, which is why he chose being with his grandmother. And he obviously didn't want to be with his father either.
I'm just catching up with some of the comments on the side, and I might even just read some of these out loud. Let's see. Jocelyn has said, a theme that I loved, self-acceptance, ultimately, and self-forgiveness, and finding a way to move on, a look at intent. That eye-to-eye contact between the two mothers in the final hospital scene, so powerful. Mothers know. Bet, or Betty, probably Bet, said, I thought that Michelle sent Vincent to kill her daughter. In my opinion, the reason that Luca didn't tell on Vincent is because he was doing okay in the grandmother's house. I would suggest that's half right. I think it's almost impossible that Michelle sent Vincent in that way. And it seems like, remember, like, Vincent is so guileless when he comes back from that thing, which happens off camera, the actual, the fall / push, whatever it was, like, happens off camera. My interpretation is that it's a fall, but it's a fall that wouldn't have happened had he not visited. So there is a certain responsibility on his part. He kind of came, agitated the daughter and such, but he tells his mother something that I don't think most people would confess to their parent, that, he was responsible for this, and then puts the burden on the mother, whose best friend's just lost her daughter now, to kind of keep his secret, or to choose a side and everything here. I mean, I love how kind of like morally complex this is, even sometimes it's ambiguous some of the time, but I think more than that, it's kind of putting us in positions of what would we do if we were put in the position of being responsible for someone's death when we meant well or whatever. But it seems like to me, Vincent had taken the initiative because he so cares for Michelle, who's been more of a mother to him than he's ever felt. And potentially, this sometimes happens. Michelle seems to be more of a mother to Vincent than she may have even been to her own daughter. I think when in the years when what is Ludovine, Valerie probably needed a mother most, she probably didn't get what she needed from Michelle. And Michelle is now in a position where she's able to give some of those things, and her daughter is now kind of has her defenses up and is kind of antagonistic. And Vincent becomes the beneficiary of certain generosity, certain forgiveness, certain, support, things like that. But Betty's or Bet's point, there was a second half about that the reason Luca didn't tell on Vincent is because he was doing okay in grandmother's house. I do want to kind of hear different opinions on, to me, of all of the choices that occur in the movie, all of the actions or whatever, the one that's almost the most perplexing is why this child, who seems to have put together, he undoubtedly recognized Vincent in the image. He wouldn't have witnessed anything before, but like he's being presented with evidence that Vincent was there the day of his mother's death. Why would he choose? And so that theory seems like a pretty good one, that he almost he seems to be content with the life that he now is in. He can't reverse his mother's death, but and he kind of knows that by lying, he will kind of keep Vincent from going to prison. But let's see. Let's hear from the next person in line. Susie, you can respond or you can offer your own curveball. It's up to you.
Well, I will say, first of all, je suis à l'équipe Michelle. I'm on Team Michelle.
Great.
from the first moment. And one thing that hit me right away as an American, a Californian, is that we are presented with a phenomena that is worldwide among the bourgeoisie, which is adult children who hate their parents or are estranged from their parents, okay? Sure. And so as soon as she was unbelievably rude and horrible, as soon as Valerie presented herself in that manner, I was like, I can't believe this. And this is a French film. This is a worldwide phenomenon. And for any parent who has ever gone to, the therapy groups one goes to, you find out quickly that the supposed reason, your mother was a whore, blah, 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 that's not the reason. That's not the reason. There are children who have parents who are major criminals who love them fiercely and
Sure.
would defend them to the death, or who feel blasé about it or have mixed feelings. But something is going on with Valérie, the fact that she was once, as we learn, very close to her mother, which is typical in this kind of psychology dynamic, but no longer. And she is using Luca in a very narcissistic way as a wedge between herself and her mother and herself and her divorcing husband. That was fascinating to me, that we are drawn into this dilemma that has bewitched a great deal of the world. On a more local angle, I laughed my way through the mushroom trope because I live in an area where there's a fungus fair, where people constantly talk about this. And in fact, the director has said that his impetus for this film, did any of you see this? It's in the IMDb trivia, was that he had an aunt who poisoned the entire family with her mushroom hunt. Even though, of course, it was called an accident, he was like, was it really?
Everyone questioned. That's hilarious.
But
it's funny.
The other thing, one last thing about the family dynamics. is as much as the family is divided between, oh, you know, we left our life of extracurricular crime behind, we are not sex workers, or we are not in jail, you know, whatever it is. One thing they have internalized down to their youngest member is you do not talk to the police ever, no matter what is going on. Never, 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 never. They
Yeah,
are
that's
not your,
an
they are
interesting
not
point.
your friend. They are not ton ami. So like, don't, you know, whatever justice needs to occur, it cannot occur within the courts, within the judiciary system. And I think that our director is showing his cards when he tells us that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really perceptive point, I think, about, you know, kind of like some of the choices. If you know, if my way of reading this movie is questioning why people make certain decisions, you know, like that is obviously one where anyone in that line of work at the time that they were doing so would have been running into afoul of the law in different ways, and would probably have internalized this kind of code. I'm going to share a personal anecdote that like you kind of made me read the mushroom scene a certain way, which is when I was probably 10 years old, my brother, who's a couple years younger, had gone and collected around the house what he thought were chives. And so like we were having, I don't know, chili or sloppy joes or something like that. My brother hates onions, but generously brought all of these things that were probably crocus flowers or daffodils, something that has, you've all seen kind of like, you know, before something blooms, that it might look like an onion in your, or a chive in your lawn. So, you know, he brought these in innocuously enough. We all helped ourselves. You know, except for him, who doesn't like them, right? And we all were violently ill, you know, and it, so like I read this as a very similar situation, you know, like and I think there's a clue when she's, you know, collecting the mushrooms, where she just doesn't distinguish between them the way her friend does, you know. So it's like, it seems like it's an innocent mistake, but I almost see the way that the daughter reads it as kind of like, you know, an innocent mistake that may have had other, you know, kind of subconscious motives or something, to be an interesting revelation. And even if I don't think there was any malice on her part, and I think it's, you know, kind of I don't think Luca's quite relevant yet. He's kind of like, you know, he comes into himself as a character a little bit later, but like I think it's important to think that it's being withheld, that the information about her past as a prostitute at this point. And so there's almost no way to read Valerie's behavior other than just extremely inappropriate and kind of, you know, mean to, and not to mention greedy. She seems to be thinking about her inheritance before her mother's passed away, and, you know, this kind of thing. Like there are a lot of kind of things that are putting Valerie into a prejudicial position, where the audience is like being led to favor Michelle without, I think as more information comes out, we might, you know, reprocess that, or on a second viewing, you know, we might be a little bit more sympathetic to her. I still think it's pretty heinous, maybe the way she treats her mom, but, you know, it's like, it's maybe easier to understand when we know a little bit more. But it's interesting how, you know, you use the expression like, you know, Ozon showing his cards. There's a degree to which he's hiding certain cards, and in doing so kind of leads us to be maybe more sympathetic to a character who, if she were introduced as a former prostitute, would already put a certain segment of the audience into a judgmental position. We get to discover who she is by her actions, by her heart, by her generosity and such, before any information that might kind of like color that. I don't know the first name of a book, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself and speak next.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's somehow just how my Zoom
That's okay.
identity
Don't worry about it. In
is
fact,
listed.
Ben, it turns
I'm
out his
actually
name's Sylvia. So
I'm actually Andrew. But okay, yeah. So I appreciate all the comments people have made, and I don't want to really add anything new or different. I do agree, though, that the moral ambiguity theme was very prominent and interesting. The one thing I would add, perhaps, is that there was that point when the mother of Vincent, what was her name? Marie Claude, the mother of Vincent, speaking of him, said, you know, he always wants to do the right thing, but he always does the wrong. And yet, it seemed in the film, there were a lot of people who were doing the wrong. That was actually the right thing. You know, if somebody had actually killed the mother, and we don't know that, that may have well have been right for that family. And even the police officers seemed to acknowledge that. It seemed fully right for people to deceive the police, even though supposedly that would be wrong. And, you know, despite what seemed to be some sort of social approbation about prostitution, you know, that nonetheless seemed right for these ladies for their own survival. So that was one issue. The only other issue I wanted to mention is the ending, and maybe you want to talk about that further. I was a little puzzled by that and really not that satisfied with it. I didn't quite, maybe I just didn't understand. But
you mean, just to clarify,
Michelle seemed to be content there. I mean, perhaps reconciling herself with her daughter, except I don't know what the basis for that reconciliation was. You would have thought that the reconciliation would have been the other way. And on top of that, I was just very puzzled about the whole scene. I mean, I thought that Valerie appeared every once in a while as an apparition, but there in the end, it seemed like she appeared realistically. I mean, apparently her presence is what caused those deers to be scuffling about, which triggered Michelle's moving away from the path. So there she see it was not simply an apparition, but a type of realism. And that didn't seem to make sense, frankly, and it seemed like almost like a cheap trick on the director's part. He somehow had to get some mechanism for Michelle to move off the path, and so he did it this way. But again, I say that because I'm not quite sure. I admit I wasn't really clear about what was happening, and maybe others have a different view.
I have some thoughts, but I'd kind of like to see if anyone wants to speak up about that. You're talking about the very, very ending in this case, then. Like, we've been seeing Valerie make these kind of appearances. I think first she appears in the passenger seat, and there it's, you know, throws us off because we understood that she's dead and what is she doing here, and then we start to understand that, you know, Michelle is having some visions. Jeanette, I'm going to come back to you, but Jocelyn raised her hand seemingly in response to this exact question, so if you don't mind taking a pause, Jocelyn, go ahead.
Thank you. I just typed in a comment. I wonder if anyone else felt they saw, and I may be drawing too much of an idea here, whether anyone else felt they saw a slow softening in Valerie's general depiction over the course of her appearances. In that very last scene, sure, she looked morose and dead, but I didn't see the anger. And I wonder whether, since I feel there are themes of self-acceptance and self-forgiveness in this film, whether Valerie herself processed an understanding of her mother and welcomed her, knowing that she was on her way to this next world. So I throw that out to the group.
That's an interesting reading. Does anyone want to add on to that? Jeanette is double raising her hand, so I have a feeling that she has thoughts upon thoughts. Jeanette, go ahead. I'd love to hear from you.
Okay, thoughts on thoughts. So I'll set aside the comments that I wanted to make before to address what was just raised.
We can take it in stages. Go ahead with your response to that last scene.
Yes, one of the things I actually wanted to say before was I love the last image of the film where she is laying kind of flat on her back, and we are looking directly down on her, and she's surrounded by these colorful leaves, and she's wearing something relatively colorful, and she just seems to kind of be part of nature. I don't know. I just thought that was just a beautiful image. But for the question of Valerie, my interpretation was the first few times she sees Valerie, she really is, it's a manifestation of her own conscience, because she kind of feels guilty, but then she doesn't feel guilty because she didn't really like her daughter that much on a personal level. And we all have people that we love that sometimes we don't like that much.
Sure.
Right? Especially in our families. And that she was working out, should she feel guilty about not feeling guilty? Should she feel guilty about not being overwhelmed with sadness at her daughter's death? And so those couple of times that we see her appear after she's dead, that's how I interpreted it, because directly after that, we have her telling, was it Vincent? I forget who, that she.
You mean after the first appearance?
No, the second.
Okay. When is the second one at the gravesite? No, the first one's in the car. There's a later one at the gravesite, right? It may be third. I'm not sure. But go ahead. What does she tell Vincent?
I forget who she tells it to, actually, but she basically says, okay, I've decided I don't feel guilty about her death. I don't feel guilty about not missing her more. I don't feel guilty, and so it's almost as if she was grappling with this issue. We had the manifestation of Valérie repeating her usual complaints, and then she decides this is how she feels, and that she accepts it in herself, right? And so then at the very end, I see that last Valérie, manifestation of Valérie, as being the actual ghost of Valérie, or welcoming her to the afterlife, or this reconciliation between the two. So for me, that kind of her appearance, her changed appearance, that of Valérie, kind of played into that for me.
So keep your hand up, Jeanette, because we're going to come back to you for the second point, but I think we might have one or two more voices on this. But I'm inclined to, Jocelyn, you made some really good points, but I think that Jeanette is probably doing a more direct reading of the way that probably is intended. And the thing that I think is important to keep in mind is Michelle doesn't know what happened to her daughter. It's a complicated thing for numerous reasons, but I think if we see that Valerie is potentially depriving Michelle of the thing that she wants most, which is access to her grandson, and so in some ways this greedy, unappreciative, bitter daughter has kind of taken an almost villainous role at the moment that she kind of takes the grandson away. And so I think that obviously the kind of ambivalence and the kind of complexity of her reaction, it's like it's terrible to lose a daughter, but in some ways this has been the removal of an obstacle, and I don't think she yet knows what has happened. She has no reason to think early on when she first sees her daughter in the passenger seat that Vincent had anything to do with it, and and so at first I think the daughter is kind of accusing her of being responsible for the death early on. And we've brought up whether there could be the possibility. Sylvia kind of added on a point to her earlier one that I think is important, that we did see Michelle essentially send Vincent to go and talk to the bullies. So there is a way in which she's kind of weaponized this this ex-con once, and so it's plausible that, like, consciously or unconsciously, that she may be aware that she has this kind of, whatever you want to call it, shark missile, whatever, that she can weapon, that she can play, and there could be all sorts of nonverbal communications. Maybe Vincent is responding to something unspoken. There's a lot left off screen in this movie, and I think that's what makes it very rich in terms of trying to interpret things, because clues seem to be, held in the gaps between things, allowing us to read them in different ways. Deidre, did you have a response about the last scene, or should we come back to you after? Go ahead.
Well, I was actually gonna respond to is it Abuch? Abuch? I'm sure I'm pronouncing it incorrectly.
I didn't catch his first name, but go ahead. You to his
To his comment, because I did notice that, but it's something that I noticed in all French films. So I don't know if it was deliberate on the part of director, or it's just the nature of just French cinematography, because I watch a lot of film and series.
more. What is it that you noticed?
There was only one a person of color in the entire film, and it was the priest. So he was prevalent from the beginning almost to the end, but he was the only person of color in the entire film. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I did notice it.
There are some surprising casting choices, and by surprising, I mean there's a laziness that often goes along with casting, where people will default to a certain type, and so seeing a Black priest was a nice surprise, just in terms of it not being the obvious thing. Also, I thought that the detective looks nothing like a detective that I've ever seen in a movie like this, and that was a nice, kind of surprise. Jeanette, I'm not forgetting you, but Meek is raising her hand. Sometimes not everyone knows how to do it with the Zoom thing. So Meek, if you want to unmute, go ahead.
Two things. One thing that excited me in the movie is, since when have we seen a movie about old ladies? It's remarkable.
We sometimes do, but this is a very unique set of old ladies. We definitely never see it about this sub-community.
Oh, it's always beautiful young men, beautiful young women, but there it wasn't, okay?
Yeah, right.
So I thought that was quite something. And secondly, on the priesthood, there are no more French priests in France. They just have a terrible time.
That's true.
Bring them. So they import them from their former colonies.
Mm-hmm.
For that reason, they come to France and they get a job, and it's a respectful job. It's the Great Migration. So that's those.
How many of you were here a few months ago when we watched? Wait, we didn't watch it. Sorry, I'm forgetting. The director of Stranger by the Lake's new film, I'm forgetting the name of it, is about a French priest, and catch up with it if you can. It's going to surprise you, kind of. Here, the title of that film is Misericordia. So put it in the back of your head and get back to me on what it says about French priests. But go ahead, Meek.
Yeah, is it also an African priest?
No, it's but there are similarities with this movie. It's kind of a psychological mystery, and the French priest has unusual motives for protecting the killer. So anyway, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Those two things. Thank you.
Okay, Jeanette, I'm going to come back to you. I'm sorry for making your original point wait so long.
There we go. That's quite all right. Okay, I'm going to just throw out a couple of things. One question and then a couple of comments, which hopefully people won't find too uninteresting or too boring. There was a reference, and this is a factual question. I wonder if I missed something, because I thought that relatively early in the film, after the daughter has been poisoned, there's been a reference made to a prior poisoning by Michelle of someone. Did I misinterpret something there?
Gosh, I don't remember that. Did anyone pick up on that detail? Okay. Jocelyn might have a response for us.
No, I have no response. I picked up on it too. That's all I can say. And I remember thinking, but I have nothing more for you. But if two of us said, there's something there.
And here, I can look. I've got the video open. Where would that have come up, when the police are investigating?
No, because I think it's a conversation with
the daughter.
With the daughter, when she basically tells the mom that she's not going to let Luca come for the summer for vacation because
Right.
she says, I don't know if you're doing it on purpose or consciously or unconsciously, but and then
Deliberately or not, you're dangerous, she says. And then there's the thing about like being toxic or whatever in that same conversation.
maybe
Valerie doesn't press charges. Go ahead.
and there's a mention of this other incident not coming out. And they say that too about her prostitution record. But I thought that they made that comment about some kind of poisoning incident prior to this. And so at that time, I kept expecting throughout the film for this to come up again so we could find out who it was that she apparently poisoned by accident or not the last time. But I don't know. I guess I'll have to search for it and see if I can find it.
Okay, let's see what else you were wanting to.
And the other thing, okay, I wanted to just ask is Ozon, and I'm not familiar with his films, but does he make a lot of references to other films and film history? I was just wondering because
Go ahead.
when Deidre mentioned, I think this, I think it was you, this division between realism and fantasy that she saw, and she saw this scene of the sex workers arriving at the church for Marie-Claude's funeral as being fantastic. It just reminded me so much of a short story by Guy de Maupassant, La Maison Tellier. It was a maison close, like a brothel that was closed for the day because all the sex workers were going to another town for the funeral of someone that they knew. And it was this impact of the sex workers all sitting together in the in the pews. I don't know. But that was also that story was filmed by OFOF. So it's a film, it was part of a film as well. And the other thing, this whole thing about the poisoning and the mushroom poisoning, Sacha Guitry made an early sound film that was called Le Roman d'un Tricheur, so the novel of a cheater. And it's all in voice off, I believe, and he's telling the story of his life, and it's very funny and very fanciful. But he explains that he came from like a family of 10, and he did something naughty. And so the next day, when the rest of his family went to pick mushrooms, he had to stay home. And they come back with the mushrooms, and he didn't get to eat any, but they all died from picking poison mushrooms. And so the moral that he took from that as a child was that he should always cheat and be naughty because, you're virtuous and you eat poison mushrooms and die.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing. I'm not necessarily cutting you off. I'm just interjecting. I mean, if you have other thoughts, we can get to them. In answer to your question, though, about Ozon, I think, yes, he is obviously very film savvy. He's not someone who tends to quote other films. He has done remakes, and when he does remakes, he often goes a very different direction. So his movie Franz is a remake of, I think it's Broken Blossoms. Why did his name just go out of my head? The German director Lubitsch film, so Franz is a Lubitsch remake. He made a remake of a Fassbinder film. He's done Fassbinder remakes a couple times. So I mean, like, he's very film literate and literature literate, and so the connections you're making, I think, are salient. But he doesn't tend to sort of like do what some other directors do, where they're almost like literally quoting a shot or a scene or something like that. So so the references you make could be things that are rattling around in the back of his head. Did you have one more point there? Okay.
No,
Jean, let's hear from you, please.
Hi, thanks. Okay, so I can't remember, what did Vincent do to go to prison? Did they say that? What was his crime? Why was he in
Oh,
prison.
Maggie might have an answer for us. Or is that about something else, Maggie? Okay, not, I don't know if it's specified. I think the thing that his mother is kind of said about like trying to do the right thing and it
Okay.
going badly is probably a version.
Well, okay, because the daughter says to Michelle, like, after what he did, and then the fact that she received when he showed up at her apartment and she even let him in, I was shocked. I thought, why is she letting him in? She knows he was in prison. I don't know what he did. And then, okay, one, I don't think her mother sent. I'm sorry.
She's been taking the mother weekly or however often to visit the son. Like, I think that the same kind of like the letting the son into her house is an extension of a kind of forgiveness or lack of judgment she had all along. I think it's highly relevant that Vincent is gay. Like we know this François Ozon himself is a gay man who half of his films seem to deal with queer things. And I think one of the dimensions that is totally extra textual, by which I mean like it's me projecting this onto the film, but I think it's likely that the grandson is gay and that Vincent is a kind of not necessarily a father figure, but a helpful, kind of role model. And the idea that he is never, ever even slightly predatory or all the kind of cliches that exist in the culture about older gay men and younger people, whether they convert someone or whatever. I think that Vincent probably sees or doesn't judge the young man who, when he returns, the first thing we notice, not only is he beautiful by now, but he has an earring, which is maybe that doesn't mean what it did in the 80s or something. But like, I feel like, what we have here is a closeted boy who doesn't know anything about himself yet, maybe recognizing someone that he identifies with. And it's entirely possible that the reason he went to prison could be related to being busted for having sex in public or who knows what. Go ahead.
So I didn't mean Michelle. I meant that her daughter let him into her apartment and then he killed her. That's what I was talking about. Not that Michelle. I didn't.
I misunderstood. Yeah.
No, that's okay. The other thing is that, when she's chopping the mushrooms, she has that moment and the camera lingers on the mushroom and she looks it up in the book and she has doubt. But then it's like, I remember thinking, okay, she's stressed about her daughter coming. They don't have a good relationship, obviously. She's getting older. I didn't think it was deliberate. I never thought it was deliberate. I thought it could have been a lapse of judgment, like when in doubt, throw it out kind of thing. And yeah, but and the other part is
the way we could read it either way is probably part of that scene, but I tend to side with you, but I'm not sure there's a definitive answer. So go ahead. I didn't mean
and the other part is I don't think in the beginning, I don't think Luca actually saw him when he went in, but once he was older and he showed the cop that he did realize, and he already was very close to him. They had a great relationship. He was playing with him. He felt very close to him. So he wasn't gonna turn him in at that point. But I just want to say one last thing. It was lovely that she went off the path and laid down and passed like a mushroom. She was like returning to the earth, like mushrooms grow out of the earth and they're from compost. And it's like, I just thought that was really
grow apparently over graves or something, so there is a cyclical.
Yes. Yeah. Very, very poetic. I thought that was beautiful. Anyway, and the fact that her daughter was reappearing to her, I don't think she deliberately killed her. I think that was, as that other woman pointed out, her own conscience trying to make peace with the passing of her daughter, and that was a gift. I thought it was lovely the way he did it. It was very well done cinematically, with her showing up that way with the makeup and all of that, and then the deer, of course, at the end. It was just.
I'll remind about one more scene that I think is pretty telling. We only see Luca's father one time, and it's clear when he's presented with the idea of being taken away with his father that he would prefer to stay with the grandmother. So I think that there's a pattern that's been kind of established, and that's a pretty key scene in us understanding maybe some of his motives. Maggie, I didn't want to deprive you of a chance to say something. If you had a thought you wanted to interject,
yes, this
go.
is quite a far afield, but I thought one of the most important scenes was when she brings the toys to Vincent to throw out.
Yeah.
And then she looks and he's playing with the toys. And I think there's something about a missed childhood and his intrigue with the toys. And it also shows his relationship with Lucas too, that they are of kind of the same mind in another way too of playing and maybe enjoying each other through the toys.
That's
But
interesting. Yeah, we see that scene where they're on the living room together. Go ahead. Did you have something else you want to say?
yeah, that's it for now.
I think one key interpretation I think that you could have is Michelle probably was not a good mother. She would probably be the first to admit it. She has regrets about it. I think that her grandson is a chance to do that over. And I think that Vincent is a different chance to do that over. And if she could do it over with her own daughter or make amends or whatever, but there's just not that possibility. There's too much conflict there. Carrie, you might be our last word if you want to speak.
Well, I just wanted to mention, I didn't see anywhere in the movie where it talked about why Vincent was in prison, but I have a sense that it wasn't a violent crime where he possibly murdered somebody or someone was violently hurt, because I don't think he would have been accepted back into society. He
Right.
opened a restaurant if that was the case, and people seem to embrace him being, oh, my battery's dying. Embraced him getting a job and put back into the community.
Yeah, opening a bar, all those things, it's
Yeah.
like it'd be hard if he had stigma around him,
Yeah. And I did notice, like you mentioned it a little bit about maybe there was gay undertones with Vincent, because there was a moment when Lucas was a child and he asked Michelle if Vincent had a girlfriend, and that was when he was just a little boy.
Right.
And then it came up again when he picked him up from the train station, and they were in the car, and Lucas asked him if he had a girlfriend.
Right.
And then I think or Vincent first asked Lucas, was he dating anybody? I forget the exact wording. But so I agree with you. There's something there. There's a fondness for each other, but it was never perverted.
Right. And I think, that's coming from a gay filmmaker. It's something that he's, doing in response to what a cliche might be. Renee, you had raised your hand. I don't know if it was a housekeeping thing or a thought, but we can kind of let you wrap us up here.
No, I just wanted to say back to the same thing that you had mentioned about the Vincent being gay, and the ending was very. I agree to your point. The gaze between those two men and the wink, I think, sort of had more to do with maybe their relationship than anything else. I mean, you knew from the beginning that Vincent was gay because you saw him go out. He said he was going out with his pots, and he went to that place that was sort of what appeared to me, if I'm not being too sordid, a cruising area. So that was subtly introduced, but I felt that there was more to the end than we're really looking at. I saw more to their relationship in their gaze at the end, which again dealt with that sort of whole juxtaposition of love and evil and good and evil. But
yeah. I think we're on a roll here. I really am enjoying our conversations that we're having around these films. Thank you to the regulars. Thank you for joining in if it was your first or early time. And next month, why am I blanking? We've got Les Diaboliques next month, which it's a classic, but we're kind of testing this out. I think it could actually be interesting every now and then to introduce kind of like great established French movies, and this one is a, you know, a stone cold, you know, masterpiece. So like, we'll have fun with it. We'll see you next month, I hope. Thank you all. Justine, do you want to sign us out? You're on mute right now.
How about now? Better. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And a special thanks, as always, to Melissa Sora, Renee Ketchum, and Isabelle Roux with the Alliance Française. Thank you to everybody who joined us today and for such a fascinating and detailed, in-depth conversation about When Fall is Coming, one of my favorite movies this year. I just put a link to Les Diaboliques in the chat. A film that actually we didn't plan it this way, but certainly I think has some things in common with the one that we talked about this month. We will see you back here next month on the 27th. All right. Thank you so much. Bye.